Welcome back to Rosters to Rings. Thad Levine here with Ken Davidoff. Ken, you were the president of the BBWAA. As a result, you had a vote for the Hall of Fame. And I think there's been a lot of controversy recently about how these votes are levied by the people who have the votes. And so, two areas I just would like to get your opinion on is how did you handle the players who maybe were accused of doing steroids, but that was never proven, and also the ones who had been proven to have used steroids? What was your take on their inclusion on your ballot for the Hall of Fame?
So my thoughts on this evolved a great deal over time, Thad. And it started out when I first got my ballot in 2007. You get your ballot after serving in the BBWA for 10 years. You get your ballot. And I think that was Mark McGuire's first year on the ballot. And I said, no, I covered those congressional hearings. He clearly used stuff. I'm not voting him in. And then the more I read about baseball history, and I remember like a friend of mine, Mike Vaccaro, wrote a book about I think it was the 1912 World Series, but I could be wrong. It was about an old World Series. And he just Mike did a great job documenting all the gambling that occurred back then, by the players. And just like the likelihood that there are players in the Hall of Fame who gambled, and to me, gambling is far worse than steroid usage. So I was like, what? I'm going to vote for these guys who were not convicted in baseball lingo, not suspended or what have you. And then, so I voted for McGuire, I voted for Clemens, I voted for Bonds, but I'm going to draw the line at A-Rod, Manny Ramirez, Palmeiro, guys who actually got suspended. But then when Bud Selig got in easily, after he retired from commissioner, and Bud Selig was part of the ownership group that committed collusion in the 1980s, and that was in my fan wheelhouse. And I remember like Tim Raines was unemployed on opening day in 1987 because of ownership collusion. And for me, that was worse than the steroids because that's damaging the value of your ticket, because the owners weren't trying their best to put together a quality product on the field. Whereas steroid usage, to me, it's one of your buddies, Rick Hahn, calls that club on club crime, right? Because it's not damaging the inherent value of the product and that everyone's trying to win. Steroids do help you win, whatever you think of them. So when Bud skated in after being found guilty 3 times of collusion by an independent arbitrator as per the collective bargaining agreement, I said, forget it. If Bud's getting in, then I'm voting for A-Rod, I'm voting for Manny, anyone else, Ryan Braun, anyone like that who got suspended. That has been the evolution of my thought process.
Well, just to add a few perspectives there, I also would say Bud Selig also presided over the majority of the steroid era. Mm-hmm. So if he did that and gets in, like maybe there's something more to your argument as well. My perspective on this, Ken, and please poke holes in this as you see fit, is I always viewed the Hall of Fame as a place for the players who are the best of their generation. And I always felt that those guys were unequivocally the best of their generation. It was a tainted generation, undoubtedly. And none of us purely know who did and who did not, because as you said, there are people in the Hall who gambled potentially even on the sport. There are people who were involved in collusion. There also were people who used steroids and we never knew they used steroids.
Right.
So I don't feel as if I'm in a position to be holier than thou. I would have them in the Hall. Here's the distinction I would have, though, is I'd probably take them out of the record books. I still think Hank Aaron deserves to be the home run king, because I'm going to work under the assumption that his performance wasn't enhanced. And so I probably would have Barry Bonds in. He was, in my opinion, unequivocally the best player or one of the best players of his generation. But I'm not sure that I would regard him as being in the hallowed space that is the annals of the records, in one of the most vaunted records in one of the best sports of our lifetimes, which is baseball, and that's the home run record. So that's the distinction I'd make. I know that's a little bit murky, maybe at on the fringes there, but in the Hall of Fame for me, probably not in the record books, and that probably goes for Clemens as well. He maybe doesn't go down as one of the best pitchers of all time, but he definitely goes down as one of the best pitchers of his generation. I don't know how much he was assisted. I can't really prognosticate that. He had a tremendous career. He dominated at different points in his career, has so many Cy Youngs. He deserves to be in, but I would keep some of those guys out of the peak of the record books.
That's interesting, Tad. I disagree with you. I think that every statistic has a story behind it. Hank Aaron, a wonderful man. He played in Atlanta, where the ballpark was known as the launching pad. So his 755 reflect that. That's the story behind. Also, for what it's worth, Hank wrote in his autobiography he tried amphetamines. And one thing about this, the problem I have with these steroid guys not getting in is the Hall of Fame is now telling a story in which wonderful human beings played the game for 75, 85 years until Mark McGwire came along, and then it turned bad. And that's why many of our generation's best players are not in the Hall of Fame. We'll table Pete Rose for the moment. But so that's like, it's almost like Gaylord Perry, King, who wrote a book about writing a spitball. He wrote a book. It's like Austin Powers writing his book. Like there's no denying it. So it's not like someone said to Gaylord Perry, well, here's saliva or whatever else you use it, and also here are steroids. And Gaylord said, oh, I'm drawing the line at steroids. Gaylord wasn't offered steroids. Steroids are a function of technological evolution. Right? Like, who's to say that the Babe wouldn't have used steroids if they had been available to him? So that's my problem. And to me, steroids don't reflect the change in morality. They reflect the change in technology.
Ken, it's good that you and I are modeling respectful disagreement, as we said. But you're absolutely right. And the home run race between Sosa and McGwire revitalized baseball, and had led to, in that whole steroid era, made a lot of money for the owners and really rejuvenated the sport as fans came out of the shadows to start watching it again.